Hi everybody. I promised you a special edition new screencast file for Physics 132 in spring 2012, and here it is. It's my hints for test 2. So first I'm going to run through some general study hints that I tell you guys all the time, but they bear repeating. Start studying early. It's almost too late to tell you to start studying early because it's less than a week until the test. But you get a sheet of notes to take into the test. One 8.5 by 11 letter size, or A4 if you're not American, sheet of notes. Start preparing it early. Even if you find that everything you wrote you throw out, it's a good exercise that helps you process things in your brain when you write the sheet of notes. So start preparing it early. Start organizing it, putting the things into categories. You can color code, you can circle things. Depends on how you think, but having that sheet started early makes you think about things early, and it just gets you ahead of the game in studying in general. Look at the old tests posted. For second tests, I have several of them on the web, a half dozen. You'll want to go through those. I'll say more about it in a minute. And at the very least, flip through the relevant sections of the book. I know that my lectures tend not to concentrate on directly translating the book. I go by my own notes, but I have followed the flow of the book, and I am presenting the same material. And the couple of times when I have some issue with what they say in the book, I've noted it. So you shouldn't have a problem with seeing the same material in the book, and it'll give you a slightly different view since I go from my notes. It's a good idea to go through the way they present it. When you study, it's a good idea to work together. You can't take the test together, but when you work together in studying, it helps you get different viewpoints. Some of you can fill in what other people are missing. Some of you can ask questions that other ones might be able to answer, and it gets the people who answer to think about the material more deeply, and the person who asked to find out what an answer might be. If you can't get an answer from each other, get help potentially from me. You guys know I'm around. You know I answer email. You know I can be asked questions. If I can't tell you something, I'll tell you that. I don't take offense at it. Get help from other people you know. If you have friends or parents or siblings who are engineers, they probably know all this material too. You can ask them or ask me. After general study hints, you want to have some specific things for my class. Because I know not everyone presents things the same way, not everyone gives tests the same way. I have a lot of old tests posted on the web. 2003, 2007, 8, 9, 10, and 11. I've got the tests posted on the web. Most of those have solutions. In fact, all of the second tests have solutions, ones with the same material roughly. Look through them for common themes. For example, I just flipped through. I found that on all of them there was a problem with a diagram with capacitors that ask you to reduce it using the series and parallel rules for capacitors, every single one. What does that tell you about what I might ask this time? Do be careful to cross out problems on topics that we didn't get to yet. Really, I tend to get to roughly the same place every time before the second test, but a couple things do have problems we haven't hit. I saw a test with a problem that had something to do with the microscopic model for current that we only touched on and haven't done the details of yet. I also saw one that reached back a little further with Coulomb's law than we have. By and large, they're pretty similar, but do check it out. If you do that, make sure you don't make that call based on one part of a problem. Sometimes part A might go into something we haven't hit yet, but part B is fair game for what we have covered. Remember, the parts are occasionally independent of each other. Since there are so many tests available and so many with solutions, you might try taking one or at least part of it in test mode and then look at the solution. What I mean by that is sit down, time yourself, have your sheet of notes and only your sheet of notes and calculator, just like you would in a test. Be in a fairly quiet place where you can work. Library is fine. At home, you can usually find a place sometime in the evening. Go through it as though you were taking a test. If you get stuck, do what you would do on the test. Once you're done, look at the solution. Try not only to see what you got right, but what was going on with the ones you got wrong. How you might try to rethink about that. Do be careful. 2010, the course was organized differently. We had a 2-day-a-week schedule, so there were only 2 midterms, and the coverage is quite different. So if you're going to go through and spend some time with the old tests, save that one for last. I would also note, which I haven't written here, if you have plenty of time and you get through looking at all of those, you might glance quickly at the old finals, because they're comprehensive finals. They cover everything, and some of them have new twists on some of the same problems. Once you've studied for the test, you'll be taking the test. Here's a few hints based on what you should already know, at least in some sense, from having taken one of my tests about a month ago, and having seen many if you looked at the ones posted on the web. First look through. I've given you a lot about my testing philosophy, and I've said many times, and you've seen in the first test, that some parts that have equal point value have very different difficulty. I do that partly because it fits my philosophy of grading, also just to make sure I value that people are getting the most basic things, as well as value that they're getting the most difficult things without penalizing them for not getting things that are very, very difficult. On that note, don't panic if one or two of the things looks a little beyond what you may have prepared for. You know I try to ask at least one, maybe 2, questions that really separate the people who are going to get A's from the people who are over the top. And I want to know that they know much more than they need for this course, which does happen. So don't worry if you see a problem that looks a little beyond what you've done. If that's the case, it may be that separator problem, and it could be no one else gets it, and I'm not worried about it. If I'm not worried about it, you shouldn't worry about it. Since I give parts with equal difficulty and try to judge all levels, if something seems too easy to be true, you might want to take it at face value. Do look critically. But you guys remember that problem on the first test where I gave you the answer to something in the page of possibly useful information just to see if you were reading. I do that. You know I do that. I'm telling you again I do that. Believe it, it happens. Sometimes I'll ask something that seems pretty simple. It might really be. Don't assume everything is simple. Make sure you know what you're looking at, but it might be. If you don't get something during the test, ask me. That is, just ask me. Don't ask anyone else. If I can't tell you, or I don't want to, I'll just say that, and that's okay. I don't get insulted by your asking a question. Finally, as a bonus for your listening to this, I'm giving you a couple of specific, pretty big hints. I made up a couple of diagrams that I'm thinking of using, and honestly, I have not made the test yet. So all I can say at this point is I'm thinking of using these, and I may change them. However, here they are. The first one, that's supposed to be charges around in, really, it's just an octagon. I may remove the circle. It was just to guide my drawing. My original thought was that what's red and blue there might be positive and negative charges, and I could ask you some things about energy, potential in different regions, stuff like that. Since I don't print the test in color, I may change that one a little bit. It's a thought. It's also not that different from some problems you've seen if you looked at the old tests. Another one that I started drawing, not sure if I want to use just as is, looks like this. It's a bunch of capacitors. I do note that anything I draw with capacitors, I might draw with resistors too, since we have covered resistors in parallel and in series at some point. You should know how to break down problems like this. This kind of problem with so many similar sections is one of the types that looks kind of similar to a couple I had before, and I twisted the numbers around on purpose just to make sure the answer came out pretty basic and I could check it right away. I might use it, I might not. I have made the diagram and I haven't used it before. Take it at face value. So again, ask me more questions if you need to before the test. When you see it, ask me questions if you really have to, but you should be in good shape. Worrying too much is a waste of time. So you can do all sorts of other things, but don't just worry.